We are talking Bunker 717. That's the UK title at least. I think most people around the world will probably know this as Deep Fear. And there's actually a French horror movie, Deep Fear, aka Bunker 717. So a French movie that takes place in the early 90s. I suspect they did that purely so they could kind of circumvent the need for kind of cell phones and having to explain how, you know, people can't kind of communicate, things like this. But it focuses on three friends as they are getting together for a kind of a goodbye trip, because one of the friends is kind of going to the army and is kind of like essentially a goodbye trip for him. And our main character out of these kind of trio of friends is kind of this girl. Wants to kind of do something special, so she ultimately asks her drug dealer if he knows of anything that could be like a special kind of day out. So this drug dealer guy suggests going on a kind of tour of the catacombs, the Parisian catacombs that are under the kind of the city and span in real life for like 2,000 acres, and a lot of it has yet to be kind of explored. So he kind of joins them, this drug dealer guy, on this kind of unofficial guided tour of these catacombs. Along the way they meet a couple of other kind of groups of people, some friendly, some not so. But ultimately the main threat down there is a kind of strange, ghoulish kind of Nazi who has been doing weird experiments underground, seemingly turning himself into some type of undead creature. Now what will happen, you'll have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss. To me, this movie was a perfect movie for a kind of a found footage style film, because it feels like it should have been done that. I guess it would be too much like As Above, So Below. Maybe that's why they decided to go for more of a traditional kind of style, kind of movie. But nonetheless, I think maybe it would be interesting to see this as a found footage movie, none the least. But yeah, the Catacombs, there's been a number of movies that have kind of been set in or around them. And obviously it's a very kind of creepy place. And as I've said, a lot of it is genuinely still not explored to this day. So what can I say that worked about this atmosphere, this movie? Well, atmosphere. That's where I was going. So atmosphere is absolutely dripping in this movie. It really does feel very, very kind of creepy. I'm not quite sure where they have filmed. To be honest, it's listed as being filmed in France and Belgium, so I'm assuming there's some type of similar looking kind of like structures there. I don't know if they film the actual catacombs. I don't know if they'd be allowed. But yeah, nonetheless, wherever they have filmed, it looks genuinely super creepy, and it just oozes menace. You know, you can kind of feel there's some type of darkness creeping around the corners. And obviously with the history of the real life catacombs, you know, you can understand why that's so much kind of, it's prevalent here in this movie, because it just kind of like oozes menace. So it really does, it's really quite an atmospheric movie. I have to say as well, the cast do a pretty good job here. I always have to prefix by saying with a foreign language movie, because it is spoken in French, you know, sometimes it can be a little difficult to kind of really feel the emotion, obviously, whilst you are reading kind of subtitles and stuff. But I think the cast here, from what I can tell at least, did a pretty good job, you know, expressing fear, friendship, and things like this. So that was all pretty good. The actual concept of this sort of undead Nazi, I want to sort of say, I wouldn't quite say a zombie, but is pretty good. He's quite a menacing kind of figure. He's in it less than you would think. The real danger here is just getting lost in the catacombs ultimately, and they face a variety of other things: cave-ins, booby traps, a gang of kind of thugs down there. So there are sort of other elements that kind of play into this kind of like what is going to be a danger here. But the actual kind of this undead Nazi guy, he's filmed and kind of dressed in a very kind of you know, scary looking fashion. I thought he was done pretty good. And I'm going to come on to this again, and maybe what didn't work, because I do feel there is some negatives to this. But they don't fully explain what is going on. So it does kind of leave you wondering and kind of like your own mind about trying to kind of fit in some of the kind of the blanks here, because you don't quite understand what it is that has happened here. I think it more or less gives you enough so you can kind of enjoy it, but if to fully kind of appreciate it, it is a little bit lacking. But there's enough there, I think, that if you could come at it from the perspectives of our protagonists who are, you know, down there with no idea that there's this kind of guy down there. You know, they wouldn't know necessarily, and maybe they even care about his backstory, but they just kind of like having to deal with the threat that as it is. So there is that. There's some fairly good prosthetic makeup and kind of gory kind of effects here. Yeah, overall I found the movie to be quite an atmospheric, albeit it takes a while to kind of get going, but nonetheless a fairly good kind of, you know, effective horror film, to be honest. What doesn't work, okay, so there are a few elements here that I feel could have been a little bit addressed further, and some which I think are goofy and didn't need to be there at all. So let me start with that. So we were introduced to our trio of friends, and it's kind of hinted at that this girl has some type of precognitive visions, because she has this kind of like prophetic dream about these kind of thug-like neo-Nazis that they end up running into in the kind of the catacombs. Yet she really hasn't kind of seen them before. They're in this bar at the beginning of the movie, but she kind of like just kind of walks past them and doesn't really pay them any attention, because at that point they haven't really become a problem. So they're just like random people in a bar. Yet we don't see them, this group doesn't actually kind of have anything to do with them really until after this kind of dream, thinking, so is she, are we meant to believe she's got some type of psychic kind of concede into the future kind of style visions? But nothing is done with it. It's there, it's introduced, and I personally think it's probably there just to have a cheap jump scare, to be honest. But it kind of makes it feel like she has some type of psychic ability, which at that point is never addressed. So, but if you think about the logistics of it, why would she be having this dream with people she hasn't had no interactions with at this point? But anyway, so there are a couple of kind of goofier moments like this. Despite the fact that this movie has quite a slow start, I never really felt like we massively got to know our characters, to be honest. Like, we get there's this one guy who kind of wants to join the army and he's having sort of second thoughts. We got our female character who's kind of biracial, and she's, you know, it's introduced to that, and then it's kind of like, that's obviously something that these neo-Nazis pick up on. And then we kind of get this kind of more of a nerdy guy. We don't know anything about him, really. So I felt, despite the fact that there's a lot of interaction, and I felt this movie is more about introducing the character of the catacombs, so to speak, I didn't really feel like we kind of got to know our trio of characters, and then the kind of like the fourth one, this drug dealer that kind of comes on a little later. Now, in regards to this Nazi kind of character itself, I mean, again, we don't know what's kind of going on. It's kind of hinted at that there may be some kind of special drug that he's taking that somehow has given him this supernatural abilities and kind of look. But then there's also a second creature down in these catacombs that kind of negates a kind of a drug that you sniff, like cocaine. That wouldn't really happen with that, I don't think. So it kind of like, it kind of backtracks on itself a little bit. So we don't know really what's kind of going on. He seems, in this Nazi character, seems like he is sentient. He's kind of talking. What's he been doing down there for 50 years or whatever? You know, it's kind of like, what has he been doing? If he is intelligent enough to communicate, well, try to communicate, or at least kind of know what he's doing, what, has he just been sat there? You know, again, there's things here that I feel are, there's questions that you'll be left with. I want to go into all of them, but especially in regards to this kind of Nazi character, I feel that there is many kind of facets of that are left unexplored. And I don't think necessarily you need to know, but it's kind of like, it raises some logistical questions again about what's kind of going on. The ending, and I'm not going to say what this is, the very ending, I'm talking about the literal last 2 minutes of this film, do not make sense in the context of what we've just seen, unfortunately. Very hard to try and kind of critique this without actually telling you what happens, but we see an action that a character takes on another character, and yet it seems to negate that in the closing seconds of the movie. And I'm thinking, well, what's happened there? What's happened? All I'll say. So I think this movie is a enjoyable film in many ways. Primarily because I think it's the setting and the idea of this kind of being lost in these catacombs, especially with a ghoulish kind of Nazi creature down there as well, is quite unsettling. And there are some kind of scary sequences. I think the acting is solid, and I think there are some quite good effects and some quite good scares. But writing wise, it's a little bit lacking. And I think the kind of the pace of it as well will put some people off, because the Nazi character is in this a lot less than you would expect, to be honest. He gets very little screen time, if we're being 100% honest here. But when he is there, he is effective, I would say. I think it could have been reworked slightly to be a bit more of a punchy film, a little bit more kind of meat on the bones, so to speak. But overall, it's an effective horror film. I'll give it a 6 out of 10. I actually still enjoyed this movie quite a bit, for some kind of good old-fashioned scares. 6 out of 10 for me. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time.